The rain had just started falling, soft at first, then harder, splashing against the tall glass windows of the skyscraper that ruled over half the city. The clock on the wall read 6:45 p.m., and most of the executives were long gone, their luxury cars already speeding down wide boulevards toward gated estates and warm dinners. But in the vast marble-floored lobby, a lone figure still worked quietly, mop in hand, bucket beside him, shoulders stooped, yet strong from years of labor that no one really noticed. His name was Samuel, a black cleaner in his mid-40s, who had been with the company nearly a decade but who remained invisible to those in suits. His hands were rough, his back ached nightly, but his eyes still carried a light that refused to dim, because when he went home, there was his son Marcus. Marcus was just 14, tall for his age, thin but quick, with a sharpness in his eyes that made teachers say he could go far if life didn't get in his way. Samuel always told him, "Son, they can take a lot from you, but never let them take your dignity." And Marcus carried those words like armor, though he often saw the way people looked at his father, as though he was part of the furniture, not a man. That night, the rain outside mirrored Samuel's mood. He had been told earlier by a supervisor that budget cuts might mean janitorial staff would be reduced. Samuel had nodded respectfully, but inside, he wondered how he would tell Marcus. How do you explain to your boy that hard work isn't always enough? He wrung out the mop, dragging it across the floor in rhythmic strokes, lost in thought. What he didn't know was that tonight someone else was about to witness him in a way no one ever had. The CEO himself, Richard Harrington, a man of wealth and power, had cut his evening short unexpectedly. He returned to the building quietly, avoiding security details because he wanted to grab some forgotten documents. Richard, tall with silver hair and eyes that gave away little, wasn't used to surprises. But when he stepped into the echoing lobby, the sound of water dripping and the squeak of a mop filled the air. He froze, his gaze locking on Samuel Dutt. The cleaner didn't notice him at first. Samuel was humming low, an old hymn his mother used to sing, but then he stopped, turned, and noticed the figure in the shadows. His heart jumped when he realized who it was. "Mr. Harrington," Samuel said quickly, lowering his gaze. "Didn't expect anyone back tonight." Richard tilted his head, studying him. "Neither did I, but here you are, still working." "Yes, sir," Samuel replied quietly. Richard didn't move for a moment. Something about the scene pulled him in. Samuel wasn't just mopping. The man moved with a kind of precision, a quiet discipline, as though every motion mattered. It was almost graceful, like he was painting the floor instead of cleaning it. Richard found himself strangely unsettled. Before either man could speak again, the glass doors opened with a loud push. Marcus rushed in, soaked from the rain, clutching his backpack. "You forgot your lunchbox again, so I came to bring it home," he called out, but then stopped when he saw Richard standing there. The CEO's eyes shifted from father to son. Marcus swallowed hard but stood tall, not wanting to show fear. "Evening, sir," he said. Richard raised an eyebrow. "You're his boy?" "Yes, sir." There was a flicker in Richard's expression, something between curiosity and a memory tugging at him. He gave a small nod, then stepped into the elevator without another word. The doors shut, leaving Samuel and Marcus in silence, hearts pounding. "From the strange encounter, Dad," Marcus whispered. "He saw you, he saw us." Samuel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Doesn't matter, we keep our heads down, do what's right." But Marcus wasn't so sure. Something about the way the CEO had looked at them lingered in his mind, a silent promise that something was about to change. 2 days later, everything did. The company was holding a celebration for a new merger, and Samuel was assigned to clean the upper floors. Late that evening, Marcus waited for him in the lobby, sketching in his notebook while he waited. He loved drawing cars, inventing designs he dreamed one day would be real. Suddenly, he noticed a sleek black car pull up. A well-dressed chauffeur stepped out and opened the back door. A man in a crisp suit leaned against the frame, beckoning toward someone inside. Marcus squinted, and his blood ran cold. The girl inside was about his age, blonde hair tied back, a nervous look in her eyes. She seemed reluctant, but the man coaxed her, whispering words Marcus couldn't hear. Something about the scene felt wrong. Danger crawled up his spine. The girl shook her head, tried to close the door, but the man's hand shot out, gripping her arm. Marcus shot to his feet, heart pounding. Then his eyes widened. He recognized her. She was the CEO's daughter. He had seen her photo in the newspaper last month when she had been at a charity event. The chauffeur glanced around, but didn't notice Marcus in the shadows. The man tugged harder, the girl's lips parting in a silent plea. Marcus's fists, clenched, his father's words rang in his head. Never let them take your dignity. He bolted toward the scene, his voice breaking through the night air, raw and desperate. Don't get in the car. The words thundered louder than the rain. The man froze, glaring at Marcus. The girl's eyes flickered with sudden hope. Did you say, boy? The man hissed, stepping toward him. I said, don't get in the car. Marcus shouted again, his voice shaking but fierce. The girl yanked her arm free, stumbling out of the car. Marcus darted forward, grabbing her hand. Run, he cried, pulling her toward the lobby doors. The chauffeur cursed, lunging after them, but the doors burst open just then. Samuel stepped out, startled to see his son dragging the CEO's daughter, both breathless and terrified. And behind them, the men gave chase. What in God's name? Samuel started, but then the girl cried out, help me, please. The lobby erupted into chaos. Security guards, hearing the commotion, rushed forward. The strange men tried to retreat, but it was too late. Within minutes, they were surrounded. Richard Harrington, who had been upstairs, stormed down with fire in his eyes. He froze when he saw his daughter clutching Marcus's arm, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad, she sobbed. He saved me. They were trying to take me. He told me not to get in the car. For a moment, silence filled the grand lobby. Richard's gaze fell on Marcus, then Samuel. The black cleaner and his son stood there, soaked in rain and fear, but burning with courage. And in that instant, the balance of power shifted. The night's chaos did not fade quickly. News of the attempted abduction spread like wildfire within the company walls, whispered among employees the following morning. Some spoke of the mysterious boy who had shouted, others of the CEO's daughter who had narrowly escaped danger. Samuel, however, remained silent as he mopped the same floors he had walked for years. Though this time the air felt heavier, as though every glance lingered longer on him and Marcus. Richard Harrington had not spoken much after the incident, but when he escorted his daughter out that night, he did something no one expected. He turned back, his sharp blue eyes landing directly on Marcus and Samuel. Don't leave, he said firmly, before walking away. Those words replayed in Samuel's mind over and over, a mixture of hope and dread curling in his stomach. Marcus, meanwhile, could barely sit still the next morning at school. His classmates stared at him after seeing his face in the news clip that aired briefly on a local station. That's him, one boy whispered. He saved the CEO's kid. Some admired him, but others sneered. Just luck, another scoffed. His dad's still just a janitor. Marcus clenched his jaw, fighting the sting in his chest. He wanted to defend his father, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he kept drawing in his notebook, lines and sketches of futuristic cars filling the page. A secret world he escaped into whenever reality cut too deep. That afternoon, Samuel received a call. His heart nearly stopped when he heard the secretary's voice on the other end. Mr. Harrington wants to see you, and your son, today. They arrived at the CEO's office hours later, both nervous. The towering glass building seemed colder than usual, the lobby more intimidating. When they were led into the top floor, Marcus's eyes widened at the sprawling office-rich mahogany. Shelves of leather-bound books, a view of the city that stretched endlessly. Richard Harrington sat behind his desk, his daughter beside him, still pale but safe. Sit, Richard said simply. Samuel hesitated, but obeyed, Marcus sitting close to his father. Richard leaned forward, fingers steepled. My daughter tells me that you, his eyes flicked to Marcus, saved her life. That without your warning, she might be gone. Marcus shifted, unsure what to say. His father spoke instead. Sir, my boy just did what was right, nothing more. Richard studied Samuel, and you. Samuel, I've seen you here, night after night, quiet, invisible, but not anymore. Silence hung heavy, then Richard stood. He walked to the window, his back turned. This company is my empire. I built it with my own hands, from nothing. But last night, for the first time in years, I realized that sometimes the greatest strength isn't found at the top. It's found where no one looks. He turned sharply, his gaze piercing. Tell me, Samuel, what is it you want for your son? The question struck Samuel like a blow. He swallowed hard. I want him to have a chance I never got, to be seen for more than what the world thinks he is. Richard nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Marcus. And you, boy, what do you want? Marcus hesitated, then lifted his notebook, hands trembling. I want to build cars, not just any cars, cars that the world has never seen. That's what I want. Richard took the notebook, flipping through the sketches, his brow furrowed. then lifted slightly in surprise. The lines were sharp, creative, ambitious. "You drew these?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said softly. For a moment, Richard said nothing. Then he closed the notebook, returning it. Talent deserves a stage. Courage deserves recognition. And loyalty. He looked at Samuel. Deserves reward. It wasn't long before whispers began throughout the company. The CEO had personally requested that Samuel and Marcus be given access to opportunities unheard of for someone of their position. Samuel was suddenly invited to meetings not as a janitor, but as a voice of reason, someone Richard wanted close by. Marcus was introduced to designers in the company's automotive division, granted a chance to learn from the very people he idolized. But with change came enemies. Not everyone welcomed their sudden rise. Some executives sneered behind closed doors, muttering about favoritism and undeserved chances. Others plotted quietly, waiting for the chance to strike back. For every smile Samuel received, there were two glares waiting to remind him of where they thought he belonged. One evening, as Samuel finished his shift, he found his locker broken into. His belongings were scattered on the floor, and a note rested on top, "Stay in your place." He clenched it in his fist, eyes burning. Marcus found him minutes later, picking up the pieces. "Dad, who did this?" Samuel shook his head. "Doesn't matter. We keep our dignity, always." But in his chest, a storm was growing. Days later, Marcus was leaving the building after a tutoring session when he overheard two men in suits whispering near the parking lot. "The CEO's blind. That boy doesn't belong here. We'll make sure he knows it." Marcus froze, his stomach churning. He wanted to shout at them, to defend his father, but he remembered his father's words. Instead, he walked away quietly, though anger burned inside him like fire. The true test came a week later. Richard had arranged a private dinner, inviting Samuel and Marcus to his estate. It was a gesture of gratitude, but it quickly became something else. As they sat around the polished table, Richard's daughter suddenly spoke. "Dad, they're not safe here." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced at Samuel and Marcus, then back at her father. "The men who tried to take me, they weren't strangers. I recognized one of them. He was at your company party last month." The room fell into stunned silence. Samuel's heart dropped. Marcus gripped his chair tightly. Richard's face hardened, realization dawning like a storm breaking over the sea. Betrayal wasn't far, and it was inside his empire. The Harrington estate grew unnervingly quiet after the revelation, every eye on the CEO's daughter as her words sank in. Richard's jaw clenched, his hand gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. "You're certain?" he asked his daughter firmly, though there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed the weight of her claim. She nodded, her eyes shimmering. "I'm sure. I saw him. He tried to hide his face, but I know what I saw." Samuel felt his chest tighten. A man from within the company had been part of the plot. The betrayal cut deeper than any outsider could. Richard leaned back, exhaling slowly. His gaze moved from his daughter to Samuel and Marcus, then to the city lights flickering beyond the tall windows. "This changes everything," he murmured. Marcus spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "They're going to come back, aren't they?" Richard turned toward him, studying the boy's courage. "Yes," he admitted, "and they won't stop until they've finished what they started." Samuel placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder, silently vowing to protect him at all costs. Yet deep down, he feared that the dangers surrounding them were larger than anything they could face alone. The following days inside the company were tense. Richard launched a discreet investigation, but word of it leaked quickly. Executives eyed one another suspiciously, alliances cracking. Samuel could feel the tension. Each night as he worked, conversations stopped when he entered the room, whispers following him like shadows. Marcus, meanwhile, was pulled deeper into the design wing where his talent began to catch real attention. But with every compliment he received, the stares from others grew colder. One evening, Marcus stayed late with a young designer named Claire, who admired his creativity. "You've got something rare," she told him, looking over his sketches. "Don't let anyone take it from you." But as they left the office, a black car lingered in the parking lot, headlights glowing. Marcus tensed, remembering the night of the attempted abduction. His pulse quickened until the car drove off. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always on him. Back at home, Samuel grew restless. The note from his locker replayed in his mind. "Stay in your place." He knew threats like that weren't idle. Late one night, as he walked through the nearly empty halls of the company, he overheard raised voices behind a closed boardroom door. "If Harrington won't keep him in check, we will," one executive hissed. Another voice replied coldly, The boy is the weak link. Remove him, and the rest crumbles. Samuel's blood ran cold. They were talking about Marcus' start the next morning. Samuel tried to mask his worry, but Marcus noticed. "What's wrong, Dad?" he pressed. Samuel sighed heavily, his eyes tired. "Some people think we don't belong here. They'll do anything to remind us." Marcus set his jaw, determination flashing. "Then we'll prove them wrong." But proving them wrong wouldn't be enough. The storm was building. Richard called Samuel to his office later that week. "I trust you more than most of the people in this company right now," he confessed. "But that makes you a target too. If you're going to stand by me, you need to be ready for what comes next." He placed a folder on the desk. Inside were documents, evidence tying to senior executives to financial corruption, and possibly to the men who tried to abduct his daughter. "They've been bleeding this company dry, and I suspect they're behind the attempt on my family." Samuel looked up, shocked. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need someone I can trust. Someone who's proven his loyalty not by title but by action." Richard's gaze softened. "And because your son already saved my daughter once, you deserve to know what kind of danger you're in." The weight of the responsibility was crushing. Samuel nodded slowly. "Then we'll stand with you." The night of the board meeting arrived, tension thick in the air. Samuel sat quietly at the edge of the grand room, Marcus by his side, both invited personally by Richard. Gasps rippled when Richard introduced them. "These two may not have power by title, but they have something more valuable tonight. They will hear everything, and those who betrayed this company will answer for it." The accused executives protested loudly, their arrogance on full display. But before the meeting could conclude, a commotion erupted outside. The sound of shouting, then crashing glass, pierced the air. Security stormed in, dragging in a man Samuel instantly recognized, the same figure Marcus had spotted lurking in the parking lot. His face was bruised, but his voice was defiant. "You can't protect them forever, Harrington. The boy doesn't belong here. Neither does his father." Marcus felt his heart pound as every eye turned toward him. The room vibrated with tension, the line between power and justice blurring. Richard rose to his feet, fury etched into his expression. "Enough," he thundered. "You underestimate this boy. You underestimate his father. But tonight the world will see the truth." The boardroom erupted into chaos. Alliances shattered, and the fight for justice moved from whispers into open war. Samuel knew then that the final battle was no longer about survival. It was about rewriting what it meant to belong. The rain hammered against the tall glass windows as if the heavens themselves bore witness to what had just unfolded. The lobby still buzzed with shock. Security had the two men pinned against the polished marble floor, their shouts muffled by heavy arms restraining them. The CEO's daughter clung to Marcus, trembling, refusing to let go of his hand. Samuel stood frozen, mop still in hand, as though unsure if this was reality or some fevered dream. Richard Harrington's sharp eyes scanned the scene, his voice cutting through the chaos like thunder. "Who are these men?" he barked, his fury rattling the guards more than the storm outside. The chauffeur stammered, but before he could form words, one of the pinned men spat. "You don't know who you're dealing with." A swift kick from security silenced him. Richard turned to his daughter, kneeling to her level. His usually composed face softened as he wiped tears from her cheeks. "Tell me everything," he urged. Her small voice quivered. "They tried to make me get in the car. I said no, but he kept pulling me. Marcus told me not to get in. He made me run. He saved me, Dad." The weight of her words filled the air. Richard looked up, meeting Marcus's wide, nervous eyes. The boy stood with his chest rising and falling rapidly, still gripping her hand as though letting go meant danger would return. Richard's gaze shifted to Samuel, who looked back with equal parts pride and fear, unsure of what this moment would mean for their lives. Police sirens wailed outside, flashing lights staining the lobby walls blue and red. Officers stormed in, hauling the men away in handcuffs. One of the guards handed Richard a wallet taken from the ringleader. Inside was identification that made Richard's jaw tighten. These were disgraced former business associates, bitter men seeking revenge through the cruelest possible way. His stomach turned at the thought of what could have happened had Marcus not been there. When the chaos began to settle, Richard approached Samuel and Marcus. For a moment the powerful CEO seemed at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing. Before sound came out, "I owe you more than I can ever repay," he finally said. His voice, usually commanding, carried a tremor. He turned to Marcus. "You saved my daughter's life. You didn't hesitate. You're a hero." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his father. I I just did what I thought was right, sir. My dad always says you can lose everything, but you can't lose your dignity. So I couldn't just stand there. His voice cracked but carried through the vast space like a bell. Samuel's eyes glistened, and Richard felt something tighten in his chest. For years he had walked past this man this clean and never seeing the humanity burning quietly beneath. And tonight, his family's safety rested entirely on the shoulders of the very people his world so often overlooked. Richard straightened, his decision clear. From this moment on, things change. Samuel Marcus, you're not invisible to me anymore. The whole company will know what you did. The next morning, the skyscraper buzzed with rumors. Employees whispered in corridors about the attempted abduction, about the CEO's daughter, and most of all, about the black cleaner's son who had shouted into the night and changed everything. By noon, an announcement summoned the entire staff to the grand auditorium. Rows upon rows of polished shoes and sharp suits filled the seats, but at the center of the stage stood Richard, his daughter, Samuel, and Marcus. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. Richard stepped forward to the podium. His voice boomed through the hall. Last night, my daughter faced danger that no father should ever have to imagine. In that moment, two people this company has overlooked for far too long became the reason she stands here safely today. He beckoned Marcus closer. The boy swallowed hard, clutching his father's hand. This young man, Marcus, shouted 3 words that saved her life. Don't get in. Words of courage, words that came from a place of honor and strength. And his father, Samuel, has served this company with quiet dignity for nearly 10 years without recognition. That ends now. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief flashing in some eyes, respect dawning in others. Richard raised his hand for silence. From this day forward, Samuel is no longer just a cleaner. He will serve as head of facilities management, with full benefits, salary, and respect befitting his dedication. And Marcus's company will fund his education every step of the way. Because courage like his must be nurtured, not wasted. Applause that followed shook the hall, some clapping out of genuine admiration, others out of reluctant acknowledgement that a shift in culture had begun. Samuel stood stunned, tears streaming despite his attempts to hold them back. He looked at Marcus, who stared wide-eyed at the sea of people rising to their feet. The boy squeezed his father's hand, whispering, "We did it, Dad. They see us now." Richard's daughter stepped forward, hugging Marcus tightly. "Thank you," she whispered through tears. "You're my best friend now, whether you like it or not." The crowd chuckled softly at the innocence in her voice, but many eyes glistened with tears. That night, when the skyscraper was once again quiet and the city lights glowed below, Samuel and Marcus walked home together. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the lamplight. For the first time in years, Samuel's shoulders didn't feel so heavy. Marcus looked up at him. "Dad, do you think things will really change?" Samuel took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. "Maybe not for the whole world, son, but for us, yes." Tonight proved that dignity, courage, and truth can't be ignored forever. The boy smiled, leaning into his father's side as they walked, and though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: their voices had been heard, and their worth finally recognized. And so the story ends with this truth: even in the darkest storms, a single act of courage can turn invisibility into honor. Never underestimate the power of standing up for what is right, for it can change lives, and sometimes, even the world.